When a school principal made a joke at her expense, nobody expected this 14-year-old to change the entire room with a piano. You ever see something so awkward in real time, you wish you could rewind life 5 seconds and stop it from happening? That's what it felt like that Friday morning at Eastgate Middle School in Toledo, Ohio. It was one of those all-school assemblies, the kind where nobody wants to be there. Not the teachers, not the kids, not even the janitor sweeping in the back pretending to care. The gym smelled like rubber soles and leftover popcorn from last night's basketball game. Folding chairs squeaked every time someone shifted, and the PA system kept crackling like it needed mouth to mouth. Principal Richard Lowell was up there, pacing back and forth on the stage like he was rehearsing for a TED Talk nobody asked for. Tall guy, mid-50s, thin hair slicked back, khakis just a little too tight around the waist. He always tried to be down with the kids, which somehow made things worse. "And now," he said into the mic with forced excitement, "a performance from our very own Eastgate Choir." The crowd gave the weakest applause known to mankind. A few scattered claps, someone coughed, and a kid in the back yelled, "Boo ring," before getting smacked by his friend. A group of about 20 kids shuffled to the stage. Among them, a student volunteer was fumbling with the Bluetooth speaker. It wouldn't connect. They tried once, twice, still nothing. Everyone in the gym started to shift, murmur, get restless. That's when Principal Lowell turned toward the front row, where all the new students were seated, and locked eyes with one girl in particular. She was sitting by herself, head slightly down, hair in 2 thick braids, hoodie sleeves pulled over her hands. Her name was Janelle Rucker, 14 years old, had only been at Eastgate for 2 weeks. Nobody really knew her yet, and honestly, she liked it that way. Janelle had just transferred from a school in Dayton after her mom took a new job at a hospital. She was quiet, observant, carried a black music notebook everywhere, but didn't say much. Some kids said she could play piano like crazy, but no one had actually heard her play, just rumors. Principal Lowell looked at her, smirked, then leaned into the mic like he was on stage at a comedy club. "Well," he said with a chuckle, "maybe our new student here can play us a little something. You know, jazz it up a bit." Laughter rippled through the crowd, not loud, but sharp, targeted. A couple of students actually turned to look at Janelle like she was part of the entertainment now. She blinked, once, twice, didn't smile, didn't flinch, just stared at the floor like she hadn't even heard him. But she did. Oh, she definitely did. And so did everyone else. Ms. Green, the choir teacher, cleared her throat awkwardly. One of the counselors looked toward the exit like maybe now was a good time to leave the gym altogether. Janelle sat still, then slowly stood up. She didn't say a word, didn't wait for permission. She just walked toward the stage, calm, quiet, like it was just another Tuesday. Principal Lowell's smile faltered. You could see it. Like he wasn't expecting her to actually go up there. The joke wasn't supposed to be taken seriously, but here she was. By the time she reached the piano on stage, the whole room was holding its breath. Not in excitement, in discomfort. You know that secondhand kind of silence where everybody's looking around like, "Yo, this ain't right." That. Janelle pulled out the bench, sat down, cracked her knuckles, and placed both hands on the keys. She didn't look at the crowd, didn't look at Lowell. She just played the first note. But that first note, it didn't sound like the start of a school performance. It sounded like the beginning of something much, much bigger. You know when someone tries to make a joke, but it lands like a rock in a glass of water? That's what this was. Principal Lowell thought he was being clever, maybe even charming in that dad joke kind of way. But as soon as Janelle sat down at that piano, everyone knew this wasn't about fun anymore. It was quiet, real quiet. And then she started playing. Not something from the school songbook, not a pop tune or a classical piece. Nah, this was something else. It started slow, a low, dragging note that held for a second longer than expected. It wasn't just music. It was memory. It sounded like a grandmother humming to herself in the kitchen after a funeral, like rain tapping on a window you forgot to close. A couple of students shifted in their seats. One kid pulled his phone out to record. You could hear someone whisper, "Wait, is she making that up?" The truth is, she was, but not in the way you think. What Janelle played was her own song. She'd written it after her cousin was shot back in Dayton. She never talked about it, not even to her mom. But she'd poured all of it into this piece, and now the keys told the story. The melody rose, soft and cautious at first, like it wasn't sure it had permission to be there. Then it started to climb, almost frantic, notes crashing into each other like arguments, pain stacking on top of pain. She didn't look up once, not even when someone in the front row whispered, "Yo, is she crying?" She was. Her hands didn't stop, but her eyes were glassy, blinking fast. And still, she played. One of the teachers near the stage, Mr. Corbin, leaned forward like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Ms. Green put her hand over her mouth. "Principal Lowell?" He looked stunned, not out of admiration, but because the room wasn't laughing anymore. Nobody was. People were feeling it, deep. Janelle kept going, switching styles in the same breath. Bits of gospel, blues, soul, even jazz. But the kind that comes from church basements and funeral homes. The kind your grandma hums when she thinks nobody's listening. This wasn't just about music. This was history. Generations of it. And she was speaking it with her fingers. Each note said something the room had been too afraid to say out loud. About assumptions. About bias. About being seen only when it's convenient. Or when it fits the script someone else wrote for you. And still, she played. The longer she went, the more the students around her stopped whispering. A few phones were out recording, but even the ones filming had that stillness on their faces. Like they weren't just capturing a moment, they were in it. One student in the back, a boy named Deshaun, who'd been clowning around earlier, put his phone down altogether, just sat there, staring. Janelle's piece finally slowed down. She brought it back to that same quiet, dragging note she'd started with, but this time, it was full, wiser, like it had been through something. She let the final chord hang in the air, then took her hands off the keys. And still, no one clapped. Not because they didn't want to, but because they didn't know how to. But the silence after that last note? It was louder than anything anyone could have said. For a full 5 seconds after the last note faded, nobody moved. You ever witness something so real, so heavy, your body forgets what it's supposed to do? That's where everyone in the room was, frozen. And not out of confusion, but out of respect. Like the moment demanded stillness. Janelle stood up slowly from the bench. Her hands dropped to her sides, fingers still twitching like they hadn't realized the song was over. Her hoodie sleeves were damp from wiping her face. She didn't smile. She didn't bow. She just turned and walked off stage the same way she came. Quiet, calm, unbothered. But inside, she was shaking. Not because she was scared, but because every ounce of emotion she'd buried since moving to Toledo had just spilled out onto that stage. And everyone saw it. As she reached the steps, Ms. Green met her halfway and placed a hand on her shoulder. No words, just that. The kind of touch that says, "I saw all of that, and it mattered." And then, finally, the applause started. It wasn't instant. It wasn't even loud at first. It began with one slow clap, then another, and then it rolled in like thunder. By the time Janelle sat back in her seat, half the room was standing. Some of the teachers had tears in their eyes. A few students were looking at her like they'd just realized she was more than the girl who sat alone at lunch with her headphones in. The same kid who yelled "boo ring" earlier? Yeah, he was clapping too. Principal Lowell stepped back up to the mic, and for once, he didn't have anything clever to say. He cleared his throat once, twice, then, "Well, thank you, Janelle. That was very powerful." His voice cracked just a little. He tried to hide it by adjusting the mic stand, but it didn't work. See, here's the thing. The joke he made wasn't just a joke. It was layered, and deep down, everybody knew it. That comment, "Maybe our new student can play us a little something, jazz it up," wasn't innocent. It came from a place, a stereotype dressed in a smile. One of those offhand comments that pretends to be harmless, but hits different when you've lived it. Janelle had lived it, for years. Back in Dayton, her music teacher once told her, "You've got that natural rhythm, must be in your blood." Another time, a substitute asked if she could play anything other than hip-hop after hearing her warm up with a chord progression she'd made. So when Lowell made that "jazz it up" joke, yeah, it wasn't new. It was just the last straw. Back in the gym, the choir finally got their speaker working, but the mood had shifted. Ms. Green stepped up and whispered something to them. A minute later, they quietly walked off stage without singing. And nobody complained. Not a single student groaned or asked why. Everyone understood. Janelle had already said everything that needed to be said. By the end of the assembly, word had already started spreading. Someone posted a clip of her playing on Instagram. Another student shared it on Snapchat with the caption, "Yo, this girl is on another level." Within 2 hours, the video had been reshared over 300 times. By the end of the school day, it had made its way onto TikTok, racking up views from people who didn't even know where Eastgate Middle School was. And Principal Lowell? He spent the rest of the day avoiding eye contact. In fact, he didn't say another word to Janelle. Not in the hallway, not during lunch, not even when she passed by his office after 7th period. But it wasn't over, not even close, because that video was just the beginning. But the real story, that was about to start once the world saw what the school had tried to turn into a joke. By Monday morning, Eastgate felt different. Not louder, not wilder, just different. Students were whispering in the halls, huddled around phones, rewatching that clip like it was the latest viral dance trend. But this wasn't some challenge. This was raw. This was real. The video had cracked something open. And not just at school. It got reposted by a local radio station's page by Sunday night. Then a regional news outlet picked it up with the headline, "Student turns joke into jaw-dropping piano performance." By the time Janelle walked into homeroom on Monday, her name was trending in the city. But here's the weird part. She didn't care about any of that. She didn't even check her phone that morning, didn't bother scrolling through comments or opening notifications, because to her, it wasn't about going viral. It was about being heard. Ms. Green stopped her in the hallway before 2nd period, pulled her aside gently and said, "You okay?" Janelle nodded. "Yeah, just tired." Ms. Green gave her a soft smile. "You shook the whole building, you know that?" Janelle looked away, unsure how to respond. "You didn't just play that piano," Ms. Green added. "You called something out, without even using words." Janelle nodded again, slower this time, like she was still trying to process the fact that people had actually heard her. Later that day, the school's office secretary, Miss Anita, handed her a stack of envelopes, notes, letters, even a couple of drawings from 6th graders saying stuff like, "You're so cool," and "You play like you mean it." And Principal Lowell, he was quieter than usual, didn't do his usual lunch table rounds, didn't try his corny jokes over the intercom. During the staff meeting that morning, word got out that the district superintendent had requested a meeting with him that week. Turns out, a few parents had already called the school, some praising Janelle, others not so much, demanding accountability. One mom, whose kid had recorded the whole thing, said in an email, "Why is a grown man making jokes at a child's expense? You need to fix this." Another wrote, "That young lady deserves an apology, publicly, and so does every other student who's ever been made to feel like a stereotype." It didn't take long before local news reached out, asking for statements. The school tried to keep things quiet, but once it hit Facebook, it was out of their hands. And through all of this, Janelle still sat by herself at lunch, not because she was lonely, but because she needed space. Her fingers tapped quietly on her jeans under the table, a melody already forming in her head. Another song, another feeling, one she hadn't figured out how to name yet. A few students came by just to say hi, or "That was amazing," but they didn't linger. Except for one kid, Malik, from her art class. He slid into the seat across from her and just nodded once. "You really played the hell out of that piano," he said. "Like, you made people feel stuff they didn't want to feel." Janelle chuckled a little. First smile all day. "You think Lowell's going to apologize?" she asked. Malik shook his head. "Doubt it. But that's okay. You already said more than he ever could." But deep down, Janelle knew an apology wasn't the end. This was bigger now. People were paying attention, and silence wasn't an option anymore. By Tuesday, things had escalated. The local TV station sent a crew to the school gates that morning. Not inside, security didn't allow that, but just enough to get some B-roll of students walking in and a voiceover that said, "What began as a routine school assembly turned into a viral moment of truth." Some parents weren't happy about the media attention. Others were glad someone was finally talking about the stuff that usually gets swept under the rug. Janelle kept her head down, but the attention didn't fade. In fact, it only grew. That same afternoon, Principal Lowell was called into a closed-door meeting with the district office. Word spread fast that he'd been strongly encouraged to make a statement. By Wednesday morning, every student and teacher was called into the auditorium again. Same stage, same piano, but a very different mood. Principal Lowell walked up to the mic. He wasn't smiling this time. You could tell by the way he held the paper in his hand that this wasn't his usual tone. No jokes, no banter, just tension. He cleared his throat. "I want to speak briefly about Friday's assembly," he began, "and about Janelle Rucker." The room got still. Phones went up. Everyone was recording. "On Friday," he said, "I made a comment that I thought was lighthearted, but I've come to understand that my words were hurtful, rooted in assumptions I didn't fully realize I was making. And for that, I want to publicly apologize." A few heads turned toward Janelle, who sat in the middle section, hoodie up. Lowell continued, "I see now how my words reflected a much larger issue, one that affects students every day, being reduced to what people think they are, instead of being seen for who they really are." He looked up, hands shaking just a little. "I apologize to Janelle, and I apologize to every student who has ever been made to feel like they didn't belong." He stepped back. That was it. Some teachers clapped. A few students joined in. It was polite, respectful, but not explosive, because most people weren't sure if they believed it yet. That same night, the district posted the video online with a caption that read, "We are committed to listening and learning." It was a nice line, but not enough. People wanted more than words. And soon, the pressure came in waves. A group of parents and teachers formed a committee to address cultural competency in schools. Some demanded that the district provide training for staff. Others wanted to invite Janelle to perform again, this time for the school board. Janelle wasn't sure how to feel about that. She wasn't trying to become the face of anything. She didn't wake up that morning planning to make a statement. She just played what was already in her: pain, history, memory. But now, that private moment had turned public. That weekend, her mom, Angela Rucker, sat with her at the kitchen table. "You okay?" she asked, pouring hot tea into 2 chipped mugs. "I guess," Janelle said. "It's just a lot." Angela reached for her daughter's hand. "You didn't do anything wrong." "I know, but I didn't mean for it to get big." Angela gave her that mom look. "Sometimes, baby, the truth gets loud all on its own." They sat in silence for a while. Then Angela asked, "Do you want to perform again? For the board?" Janelle shrugged. "I don't know. Part of me feels like they're only asking because they feel guilty." Angela nodded. "Maybe, but that don't mean they don't need to hear it again." Janelle looked down at her hands, the same ones that told a whole story without ever saying a word. Then she whispered, "If I do it, I want to play something new." Angela smiled. "Then write it. Write what they still need to hear." But deep down, Janelle knew this time it wasn't about defending herself. It was about building something that would last longer than the moment. 2 weeks later, the school board meeting was standing room only. Parents packed the seats. Teachers leaned against the walls. News crews stood outside, waiting. And right in the front row, in jeans and a plain gray hoodie, sat Janelle. This time, she brought her own keyboard. Not because she didn't trust the school's equipment, but because this performance wasn't for them. It was for her. She walked to the mic when her name was called. No notes in her hand, no speech. Just a quiet confidence that felt heavier than any speech could carry. "My name is Janelle Rucker," she began. "I'm 14. I go to Eastgate Middle." Her voice didn't tremble. It was steady, clear. "I didn't ask to be part of this conversation. I didn't want to be on camera. I didn't want to go viral. I just wanted to play my music." She paused, looked around the room. "But the thing is, people like me don't always get to choose when we become the center of something. Sometimes the world makes assumptions about you before you even open your mouth. And when that happens, you've got 2 options. Stay quiet or speak with what you've got." She sat at her keyboard, no build-up, no introduction. She just started playing, and the room went still again. But this time, people leaned in. They wanted to hear it. The song wasn't as heavy as the one she played during the assembly. It was slower, more hopeful, but there were still sharp edges in it. little stabs of pain that poked through the chords, like she was saying, "I'm still here. I'm still carrying it." About halfway through, her left hand dropped into a darker rhythm, a callback to the original song, a reminder. Then her right hand took over, light, free, almost playful. It sounded like moving forward. By the end, there were tears again. But these weren't the same. These were the kind you get when something finally makes sense. The applause came before she could even take her hands off the keys. She looked up, and for the first time since she got to Eastgate, she felt it. They saw her, not as a new kid, not as a stereotype, not as a joke, but as a person, an artist, a girl who had something to say and the guts to say it. After the meeting, a few parents came up to her. One dad said, "I wish my daughter had your strength." A teacher she'd never even met told her, "You changed something in this building." Even Principal Lowell approached her. His hands were in his pockets, face tight like he was still trying to find the right words. "Janelle," he said quietly, "thank you. You've taught me more in 2 weeks than I learned in 2 decades. She didn't say anything right away, just looked at him. Then I hope you're ready to keep learning." He nodded. "I am." Was he perfect now? No. But that's not how change works. It starts with a mirror. And Janelle, she held it up for the whole school to see. A few days later, Eastgate announced a new student-led music program, not just for performances, but for storytelling, for healing. Janelle didn't want to run it, but she agreed to help design it. Because what she'd started, it wasn't just about one moment, one song, or one mistake. It was about what happens after, when the laughter stops, when the music fades, when it's time to listen, really listen. That's when the real change begins. So next time you hear someone being made into a punchline, ask yourself, what's the story behind their silence? What are they holding back, just waiting to release? And maybe, just maybe, give them a piano instead of a microphone. Let them speak in their own language. Because sometimes the loudest voices come from the quietest corners. And when we listen, really listen, we don't just hear music. We hear truth. If this story made you feel something, share it. Talk about it. Play it for someone else. Because silence can hold pain, but your voice can spark change.